NXT, NXT, NXT. Triple H talked a lot about NXT during his WWE Hall of Fame speech in April 2025, and you can see why. It's been his pet project since he began his rise through WWE's corporate ranks, and it's given us some of the biggest names in today's wrestling industry. 2/3 of the WrestleMania Night 1 main event were NXT graduates, in Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, who was in fact the inaugural champion on the black and gold brand. It also gave us the likes of Finn Balor, Shinsuke Nakamura, LA Knight, Gunther, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Bayley, and pretty much every other great women's wrestler you can think of on the WWE roster today. It even gave us the likes of Jon Moxley and Mercedes Moné, who are on top of things over in AEW. Drew McIntyre had a run as NXT champion, Big E was NXT champion, even FTR made their name in NXT. You'd assume with such a long list of high-achieving graduates that NXT has been nothing but a success, forgetting of course the ill-fated NXT 2.0. Some superstars got their best treatment in WWE during their time in NXT, but that is not the problem. The problem begins when the NXT talents get to the main roster, left in the less than capable hands of the mid-2010s WWE creative philosophy. And when you look a little bit deeper, there's a pretty long list of misses in that regard. But you can't win them all, can you? I'm Liam from Sportskeeda Wrestling, and today we're looking at the time WWE fumbled a whole generation of talent. But before we go any further, why not help us on our push to 200,000 subscribers, which you can do by hitting subscribe and enabling notifications so you never miss one of these videos. Thank you, and on with the video. Just as a rule, we're only going to be talking about the original black and gold televised era of NXT between 2014 and 2020, WWE Network NXT, and all its adjacent talent. And we'll start this video in an area that WWE has always struggled with to some extent, and that is tag teams. There were some really great tag teams and factions that passed through NXT over the years. The likes of the Revival, American Alpha, the Authors of Pain, DIY, the Ascension, Sanity, the Lucha Dragons, Imperium, the Vaudevillains, Danny Burch and Oni Lorcan, Heavy Machinery, the Street Profits, the War Raiders, Hit Row, the Undisputed Era, and Blake and Murphy, to name just a few. NXT was the place to go for tag team wrestling in the mid-2010s. Producing banger after banger after banger, to steal a phrase from Sheamus. But of that list of once promising tag teams, only 4 still exist at time of recording, 3 in WWE. FTR, formerly The Revival, are still going strong, as are DIY, the Street Profits and the War Raiders, who all got WWE tag title runs within the last 2 years. However, most of the other teams were not so lucky. They found themselves quickly out of favour, split up or changed completely, erasing the formula that made them winners to begin with. The Ascension, for example, had a very impressive record-setting reign of 364 days as NXT Tag Team Champions. They had an eerie harbinger of doom type character, and when they found themselves moved to the main roster, they were changed to the T-Move version of the Road Warriors and jobbed out to everyone in sight, including some of the WWE's old guard who found the impersonation quite insulting, despite the fact that they were being told to do it. Or Sanity, who were brought to the main roster and never used, with the members either released or sent back to NXT, bar of course Nikki Cross, who continues to have a very respectable main roster run up to this point. Or the Undisputed Era, who ruled the entire NXT men's title picture for years, but didn't get a single main roster run between them. Or the likes of American Alpha and Imperium, who had great chemistry as units but were split up well before their time. The same goes for Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy, now Big Bill, who were incredibly over during their main roster run but were split before getting a reign with the tag belts, though their departure from the company was a little more complex than simply a dropped ball on WWE's part. WWE did bring back the likes of Hit Row and the Authors of Pain when Triple H began his creative reign, but it didn't really work out, with AOP's short-lived time in the Final Testament leaving a lot to be desired, and only B-Fab remaining from Hit Row on the main roster. Tag teams are something that WWE rarely gets right in modern times. They've neglected their titles and divisions, using them simply to move single storylines forward, though that did change somewhat with the main event match between the Usos and Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens for the unified WWE Tag Team Championships at WrestleMania 39, Night 1. And yeah, maybe some of those teams we've mentioned weren't meant for superstardom, but they definitely could have made for some exciting matches had they been treated properly. They could have propped up an emerging division from underneath, but to this day, WWE tag divisions are still ridiculously thin. However, it wasn't just tag teams that suffered when their NXT runs ended. Prospective singles talent also felt the sting. Quite a few NXT champions have found themselves underutilized or straight up wasted on the main roster. The most obvious example of this is Bo Dallas. Believe it or not, it seemed like WWE had some really high hopes for Bo Dallas, during his original NXT run at least. He had a reasonably long run with the brand's top championship, record-setting at the time, managing to retain again and again and again, much to the annoyance of the NXT crowd. who may in fact not have been believers. It was a great act until it found its way to the main roster, with more goofiness and less success. A man who was the equivalent of a world champion in NXT was suddenly remade as a comedy enhancement talent. He'd been stripped of his nuance entirely. It was a similar story with Adrian Neville, now known as Pac, who was a dominant high-flying champion in NXT, and while he did do okay during his main roster run, they did make him wear a superhero cape during his entrance at the start, though he did get a chance to be more serious with his King of the Cruiserweights gimmick before he departed the company entirely. Then there was Keith Lee, an immense powerhouse wrestler with the agility of a cruiserweight. A standout talent during his time in NXT, holding both the NXT Championship and the NXT North American Championship at the same time prior to his main roster call-up. He also got a chance to stand face-to-face in the ring with Brock Lesnar after entering the Royal Rumble for the first time. Oh, and he fully yeeted Adam Cole into the crowd during one of the most viral NXT moments of all time. As WWE fumbled his main roster run, they tried desperately to save him with a repackage as Bearcat Lee, a homage to legendary wrestler Bearcat Wright. Except this was more like Bearcat Wrong. There was no real reason for this other than Vince really wanted to do a homage to Bearcat Wright, we suppose. It didn't really work for anyone, and Keith Lee departed the company for good in 2021. Then there was Alistar Black, who spinning hook and kicked his way to the NXT Championship, but also fell a little bit flat during his main roster run. Despite some backstage having high hopes for him, he was released in 2021, but WWE may have a chance to redeem their fumble given his 2025 return to the company. Similarly to Karrion Kross, who was a dominant monster heel champion during his initial days in NXT, with a great theatrical entrance which featured his wife Scarlett, and all the over-the-top showmanship that WWE loves so much. This seemed like a recipe for success, until WWE decided to dress him up like a character from a Mad Max movie, complete with a cheap, lousy looking helmet, and have him lose his debut while still the NXT champion. Then release him. Kross is back now and doing some promising work in 2025, but he hasn't had all that much to do since resigning with the company. Then we have Shinsuke Nakamura, and you probably think I'm crazy for saying that, because Shinsuke Nakamura has won multiple championships, a Royal Rumble, and still gets regular TV time in 2025. And this is all true, but WWE had the potential for the biggest main event level Japanese star of all time and somehow fumbled him to a reliable mid-card act. He could have been the first ever Japanese WWE champion, and that doesn't seem at all likely to happen anymore. On the women's side of things, there was Ember Moon, who found big success as Athena in AEW and Ring of Honor. She was NXT Women's Champion, but she didn't hold her place on the WWE main roster like some other main event female talents from her generation did. She is of course a great athlete and a compelling character, and exists as one of the few fumbles from WWE's women's division at the time. So they fumbled tag teams and singles talents, but they proved they could go one further when they fumbled a whole side project, division, TV show, championship and roster, all in one go. It began with the competitors of the Cruiserweight Classic, one of the most realistic sports-based presentations of wrestling seen in the mainstream for decades, adjacent to NXT and some of the critically acclaimed work they were doing at the time. Among those fumbled were finalists Gran Metalik and eventual winner TJ Perkins, who was crowned the inaugural Cruiserweight champion, dropping it 45 days later to Brian Kendrick. What followed the CWC was a half-baked attempt to relaunch the Cruiserweight division, exclusively on Raw, purple ropes and all. This even spawned a spin-off show called 205 Live, a Cruiserweight-only brand that featured the likes of Perkins, Arya Daivari, Tony Nese, Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexander, and others. But the most memorable thing about that show was the way Noam Dar pronounced Alicia Fox's name. I'm not going to do an impression of that, but trust me, it was funny, and Vince McMahon clearly thought it was funny, because he had him do it again, and again, and again, until it wasn't funny anymore. The 205 Live show fell flat, as did the whole division, which was eventually dropped from Monday Night Raw altogether. This failure was mainly due to lack of creative effort, and no distinction between the performers on the roster. They were talented, but they just wrestled. Very few were given the chance to show any real personality. The Cruiserweight Championship was moved fully to NXT in late 2019, and retired completely in 2022, as was 205 Live, which somehow survived 6 years on the air, despite being panned across the board by pretty much everybody who knew about it. Competitors like Gran Metalik and Lince Dorado were kept on the roster and used as enhancement talent as part of the Lucha House Party faction, but it was a waste of their talents, especially in the case of Gran Metalik. And if only briefly, we can touch upon the sad fate that befell the NXT talents called to the main roster to be a part of Retribution, given names like Slapjack and T-Bar, hired by WWE despite the fact that they already worked for WWE and were hijacking the show from the inside. Mustafa Ali was the leader. It's best if you just forget it all. I'm trying to. At least Mia Yim managed to escape the whole thing though, relatively unharmed. Now don't get us wrong, a lot of people we've mentioned here did swing themselves some significant TV time during their WWE main roster run. They got paid for it too, which is something that no one's going to complain about. If anything, the loss was WWE's and not theirs. As you can probably tell by the name of this video, we believe WWE fumbled these once prospective talents, on some level at least, and there were a lot of them. The talents may have gotten their money from the company, but the company certainly didn't get the most out of the talents. They could have made a lot more money with some of the names we've mentioned here, or at least some money with some of the names we've mentioned here. WWE's current developmental system has delivered some absolute megastars in the last decade or so, some even in the last few years. But as you can see here, they also lost out on a lot of potential superstars who might have been big names or even main event stars if handled properly. Still, I'm sure WWE and its executives haven't lost too much sleep over it, given that they've got a bottomless pit of money, and an endless pool of talent, and abundant resources, and hundreds of millions of fans, and raucous international audiences, and countless sellout events in huge buildings, and extortionate ticket prices to go along with it. Isn't wrestling great? And that's all we got time for another video. Who was WWE's worst fumble from this era? Did we miss any out? Let us know down in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sportskeeda Wrestling to see more content like this. And why not enable notifications too, so you'll be the first to know when a new video drops. This has been Sportskeeda Wrestling, I've been Liam, and we'll see you next time.